Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder it is time to have a look at another Devblog for updates 1.91. And this time it's time to have a look at three new maps. We have cargo ports, Palau Islands, and of course the Japanese port as well. These are two naval maps and a ground map, but this ground forces map is seen as a mixed battles map, which I'm guessing just means it will be available mainly in ground realistic, but it looks like there's a lot of high definition on it, just like all of the other maps as well. One thing I do want to point out is when it comes to devblogs and stuff, it's always nice talking about new vehicles, it's always nice talking about ideas around them, but for me, the main interesting devblogs are stuff like the mechanics and the maps, because those affect a lot more stuff in the game than just a specific vehicle. Most people may look forward to like one vehicle which is coming in an update, but for me, the fact is, instead of grinding that one vehicle, I'm probably going to end up playing on this map here about 50 times over the first week of the update, instead of, something such as a vehicle which I'm grinding towards. So for me, the maps portion is incredibly important compared to other areas of the game. Now, when I think of the maps that were released over the last year or so, a lot of them, especially ground forces maps, have been, decently on the small side. There seems to have been a shift from these mid-range maps, such as Mozdok and maps like this, into more either really short range or really long range maps. So you have stuff like Sands of Sinai and Fulda, which of course Fulda came out in update 1.77, update 1.71, nearly 2 years ago at this point. And then you had stuff like Middle East, Alaska, maps like American Desert, which definitely fill the short engagement route. What I'm hoping for from Cargo Port, which is a ground forces mixed battle map, it's a little bit bigger. And unfortunately, when I read this, it says that you're looking for short and mid engagement ranges once again. So even though this might be the whole map, what you are seeing is a decently large map, but everything is designed through some short little engagements. And from the pictures that we see here, so this is what one of the lanes of engagement looks like, fighting along the port. It looks incredibly highly detailed, which is lovely, and I hope you can knock down the cranes, and hopefully from Alaska we get carried on this idea of destructible buildings and all of this, so maybe you'll be able to sink a tanker. I mean, that's obviously a pipe dream. And then you've got a really nice high quality model of this plane, plus of course the fences, which look lovely. Everything looks very nice here, and there seems to be a lot of terrain which you should be able to shoot through. Either the fence, the cargo here, the vehicles, and of course you have the what looks like wooden pallets. There's a lot of stuff that you can screw up with stuff like APF SDS. The main issue I'm seeing though is where is this on this map? Well, it's this little area here, right? Because obviously this is where the tanker is. So if this is here, then this is going to be the area of engagement. And if it's only this big, actually, I'll just check. Can you actually see my mouse? Yes, you can. So if it's only this big, then I'm not really, that enticed by it. But if it expands out towards this area around here, and we start incorporating some of these grassy areas, this area here, which looks like it has a wind farm in it, and maybe over here as well, which gives you a little bit of expansion, then we can start talking. One of the problems with a map like Alaska is if you have just a few major roads, you can just sit a vehicle at the end of each major road and lock down the city area quite easily. Now, the way that Alaska gets around this is because it has a lot of side streets, and also the central street it doesn't have just straight roads going past it. Instead, what it has is roads which kind of lead to it, and then once you led to it, then you go into different roads if you want to push past it, which I think works really well. When I look at this map, though, all I see is decently straight main streets around these areas, and then also the ideas of little paths between buildings, which hopefully means that you'll be able to change lanes. I'm always worried about on city maps just the general 3-lane or 4-lane structure being abused massively by a few vehicles. It's very easy to lock down this area. All you do is put a tank behind here and just wait and make sure to get the first shot off. And this is something which, whenever you have maps which are based around grids, which this is looking like, you're going to run into a problem with, because it's not hard to cover a grid when it comes to overall play in ground forces. In air forces, you don't obviously have that issue, but if your AI is set up in grid formations, it's very easy to deal with them as well, because you basically sort out that grid. Once that grid's sorted out, you move to the next one, and then the next one, and you just do it in squares. So yeah, it's definitely a bit of an issue, in my opinion. The next one being Palau Islands. Palau Islands looks absolutely stunning. One of the things about Naval, Naval is easily the best looking part of the game. Since I upgraded my graphics card, all I can say is I am stunned by the graphical fidelity of not just the ships in Naval, but also the maps themselves. The maps themselves look absolutely beautiful. The 3D designs that they use to litter all over the maps in War Thunder are absolutely wonderful. So, like the castles, the sunken ships, such as this one here. Then, of course, you have lighthouses. It just is amazing, and I hope that we start getting more night battles in Naval. So, therefore, we can actually get lighthouses starting to, throw around some light. So, as it says here, these picturesque floating rocks topped with emerald green could be found in the Palau archipelago. The most dramatic sea battles for control over the Pacifics will take place in turquoise bays and scattered rocks of the Palau Islands. Full speed ahead, captains. This, to me, when I have a look at this picture here, so one thing that Gaijin have been pushing towards when it comes to naval maps is maps which try and fit to areas. So they try and make it friendly for smaller vehicles, and then they try and make it unfriendly for larger vehicles in others. Let's try and set this up. So, if you have a look at a lot of maps in Naval, what you'll find is one part of the map will be heavily saturated with small islands, and it will be heavily saturated with a lot of greenery and a lot of vegetation, and that would be this part of the map here. This is designed so smaller boats can actually fight each other without being lambasted by the larger boats, which are normally going to be sat over here in much more expansive water. So therefore, both sides can actually compete with each other without having to deal with the other. Now, this is a consequence of the fact that small boats don't really match up too well against larger boats. So therefore, and what I'm talking about here is the PT boat versus the destroyer, or the destroyer versus, the light or heavy cruiser. So what happens instead is you have a situation where you have two battles going on simultaneously on one map, and then eventually after 10 minutes, if the ticket counter hasn't gone down enough, then what happens is both of those sides start intertwining, but it's always the larger ships moving into the smaller ships area. It is never the smaller ships going to the larger ships area. So if you dominate the large ship area and then move down to the smaller ship area, generally you're going to win the game. But if your enemy does that, then unfortunately, when it comes to the PT boats and stuff, they're going to be under heavy pressure. When I look at this map, that's what I see. What I see here is a small area for ships, and for boats. And then when I look over here, I see an expansive area for massive ships. And then when we have this is just a further confirmation of the smaller area. Hopefully this isn't like Volcanic Island, where you have like a big central dome in a way, with not a lot of cover in the center, because to me, what has happened on Volcanic Island when I've played on it is people just sit on the entrances to it with larger guns and they just pepper people, going into the central zone. I do this a lot in my river class and also stuff like the AFDs because all you have to do is just line up shots and they're able to get nuked because the limited range that a lot of the vehicles have means that they can't shoot you and you're able to shoot them. So as long as this isn't like a central point, central hub for a dome idea, then, it should be quite nice. And as we talked about, the graphical fidelity is beautiful. Then we have this as well, which once again indicates a smaller area of the map, which is at least closer to some other islands over here. So all three of these pictures indicate that this is going to be a small map, but there is no way that they only make it for small vessels, because every map that we've had, even if it is designed for smaller vessels, it still has some expansion for the larger machines which are set around the place. So for me, I'm looking forward to it. I hope it's not very similar to other naval maps, not because I don't think the other naval maps are good, even though some of them are definitely better than others. I've actually been enjoying Mediterranean Port quite a lot recently as a higher tier map, not really as a lower tier map. But the main thing is, when it comes to these style of maps, is there is a lot which are very similar in design and very similar in mainly design philosophy. With, as I said before, you have the small boat area and then the large ship area. So hopefully we see a difference there. And then we have Japanese port, which as you can see is a modern day port, or maybe not modern day, but at least more modern than what we used to. It's a massive harbor, which is designed for transporting. Is that the inactive volcano in Japan? I mean, it might be. So the naval battles location was inspired by the landscapes of Japan and the Yokohama trade port. A scenic East Asia Bay will be open for naval vessels and aircraft when update 1.91 goes live. See you there soon. So for me, now when I look at this, is that Mount Fuji, I think? I'll just check. Let's see. Because I'm sure I will get this wrong. I mean, it might be Mount Fuji. It kind of looks like Mount Fuji. Yeah. You know what? Here we go. I'm guessing it's Fuji. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But the main thing is, when it comes to ideas like this, you have a really nice picturesque idea. So when I look at maps like this, alongside stuff like Mediterranean ports, alongside stuff like the Fiji map, they're very vibrant. They have a lot of colors going on, and it's really nice. And on top of this as well, what I see from this map is there's a nice little mixture of culture. And the problem with this, right, is I'm not talking about them from a gameplay point of view because it's very hard to distinguish what you can see from these few pictures. Instead, this is just to give you a little bit of a sniff of what's actually going on. But for me, when I look at a map like this, the first thing that springs to mind is you have the classical culture of the Japanese right here in the form of the temple, and then you have the old style ship here, then you have an entrance in the water which looks really beautiful, plus a nice little old village, and then you have modernization and the takeover of the transport industry and also the general goods industry. So you have both sides of an equation here, which at least in history are always fighting each other when it comes to preserving the past and going forward to the future. So even though it might be a little bit technical for a War Thunder game, that's what I see out of these pictures. To me, it's just it's one of those nice things to think about, because in a map you in a way want it to tell a story, no matter what game that you're in. You want a map to present a part of history, to be interesting, and to be able to cement something in history, which is why when you see a map like this, it's kind of hard to try and work out, what it's about, where it's from, because everything looks very similar, everything looks very samey. And then you go to this map, the Palau Islands, and you're like, okay, so this is, looking at this little community here. And then you've got a few lighthouses around the place. Obviously, a lot of ships get wrecked because of the fact that the islands are there, so you can understand that. And then you get this, and it's like, okay, so we have a clash of cultures, and you can try and like work around that whole idea. So for me, the interesting part of these, at least so far, is the gameplay. I hope that gameplay is good. I hope that on the dev server we're able to play them a decent amount, so I can understand, what's going on. Because I see a lot of destructible stuff in this. I see a mixture of ship and boat in this, and here it's very hard to tell what's going on, apart from maybe it's a larger ship map. But then what would be the point in doing this harbor like this? Instead, you would want it to be a boat map, so you can see all the nice details. So overall, I'm happy we're getting 3 new maps. Hopefully we get some more variations of old maps as well. Would be nice to see some form of lower tier aerialistic map instead of just all those ground maps that they added, like the Normandy map and the Mozdok map for air. So hopefully at some point we do see a bridge into that, but just to see 3 new maps come into the game in 1.91 makes me incredibly happy. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Mopar 1969, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyans Terry, and Elove Goats, and of course Seductive Trash Can for supporting the channel.